Before I could begin to tell you about my experience as a brother in the 60s, first I need to tell you about Pi Chapter in West Virginia University, where, as you just heard, I landed in 1965. My back scratcher, I use as a pointer. When many of you think of West Virginia and a chapter there, you probably think of a bunch of mountain men sitting in front of a cabin with moonshine and shotguns. And that would be your impression of what a chapter in West Virginia might be like. However, in 1921, Pi Chapter was voted outstanding chapter. And the real house as it exists today is on Spruce Street in Morgantown. And I went by a few years ago and took this picture of the house. It's changed somewhat. The dormer up here on top wasn't there, and the front door used to be to the right. Now it's in the center. There's a little hole in the grass here. It used to be a big rock. When I was a pledge, I painted that rock. I painted the letters Alpha Phi Delta on. That was one of my jobs. Do it or you get swatted. No, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it. Spruce Street in Morgantown is a street that has about a 30-degree angle. So it was a big hill, and of the 15 brothers that we had at the time, 9 of us had motorcycles. So we had a good camaraderie amongst us. I couldn't tell you, if I'm going to speak about Pi Chapter, I have to tell you about this woman, Ann Denardi, who was our house mother. She was probably house mother for 30 some odd years at Pi Chapter. Now, in 1929, my uncle pledged at the Theta Chapter at New York University and became a brother of Alpha Phi Delta. And then in 1929, he went to Morgantown. He was in Pi Chapter in Morgantown, and he and Ann partied together, 29, 30, during those years. They knew each other. Remember how Italians got together when they realized they were Italian and they had something in common? Well, I'm sure that's what my uncle and Ann Denardi experienced, being Italian students in an American university. Ann graduated with a degree in pharmacy in 1931, and then she opened up a drugstore on High Street in Morgantown. And she literally became the maitre d' of Morgantown. She knew everyone knew her. So when I showed up in '67 at Pi Chapter, and Ann was the house mother, we immediately had a bond that went back to 1929, when she knew my uncle. Now, Ann lived in a house right by the WVU field house where the basketball games were played. And one year, 1955, the WVU head coach was Fred Schaus. If you guys can remember, he was the Lakers coach at one point in the 60s. But Fred Schaus was the basketball coach at West Virginia, and he learned of a guy down in Charleston who was living under the steps in a YMCA under a staircase, and he wanted to bring him up to West Virginia to play basketball. This was 1955. That guy's name was Hot Rod Hundley. So I said living under the steps of the YMCA. His parents were divorced, and he didn't have a family. So Fred brought him to Morgantown to play basketball, and he needed a place to live. So being that Ann had a house next to the field house, he asked Ann if she would board him. And so Hot Rod Hundley lived in Ann's house. She was the first of many basketball players that began to live with her during that time. Now, after Hot Rod Hundley left, the next player was Jerry West. And Jerry West lived with Ann and Artie in her house, and next to the field house. In 1973, the brothers at Pi Chapter gave her a plaque for all the years that she, from 1929, she was affiliated with Pi Chapter to the 70s, 40 years. We gave her a plaque, and in 1996, on her 90th birthday, Jerry West came back to Morgantown with Hot Rod Hundley and Willie Akers and a bunch of other players, and they gave her a big party at the out at the lake at a big chateau. Also in 1996, my son started college at West Virginia. He was a freshman, and I went down to WVU with him, and we went and knocked on Ann's door, and she came to the door, and I hadn't seen her in 25 years, since I graduated in 1970, and we hugged and we cried, and I sat at her kitchen table with my son, just the way Jerry West is sitting there now, and reminisced about the names and who's where and all the years that had passed. So now, I talked to you about the Pi Chapter earlier. The fraternity house that I walked into, and all of a sudden I felt like I belonged. In 1968, they elected me president. 67, 68, I was treasurer, and then 68, 69, they made me president. And this was the picture that was taken in the college yearbook for that year. 10 of us guys, 10 of those 15 guys, sitting in a convertible. If you can't see it too well, but the trim is missing from the driver's door. And that about says it all about who we were. We weren't for pretense. You know, it was a convenient place to take a photo, and we did that. 45 years later, this is a picture of me in 1969 when I was president with my future wife. She came down for a spring weekend. Now, 45 years after this picture was taken, in 2014, we got together again, 45 years later. This brother is Wally Lero. He owns a hotel in Wildwood, New Jersey, and we got 10 of the 15 guys came back to be together again. And just this past August, when I was driving from New York to Chicago, I stopped in West Virginia. And I called up my big brother, Pat Cipriani. I needed a place to stay, halfway to Chicago. And I stayed with him. And it so happened that my little brother was in town also, Walt Angelini. That's Pat Cipriani. This is Walt Angelini, who's an attorney now. He was there too. He said, tomorrow morning before you leave, meet me at McDonald's. I want to see you before you go. Guys, that's 50 years of brotherhood. 2019. I hope that you guys can have the kind of experience that I had at Pi Chapter at West Virginia with those brothers, that 50 years from today, you guys can come together and say, and talk about the times that you had in school now, and have that last and be meaningful throughout your life. But that's brotherhood for life. Thank you.